Hello and welcome to the Talking NorCal podcast, the official podcast of Active NorCal. I am your host, Zach O'Brien, and I am so excited to be here today to discuss a seminal moment in outdoor culture history for Northern California. Today we are talking about the 40th anniversary of the deadly avalanche at Alpine Meadows. March 31st, 1982, an avalanche came down, killing 7 people total. It was a seminal moment in that North Lake Tahoe community, and today we're going to dive super deep into it. We have Jared Drake and Stephen Siig on the podcast. They are the directors and the writers of the brand new documentary Buried, which covers this entire event. I was able to get a sneak peek of the film. It is fantastic, and I can't wait to talk to them about it. Then we are going to bring on the man, the myth, the legend, Chip O'Brien. Him and I both recently read A Wall of White. It is a 2009 book dedicated directly to this event, written by Jennifer Woodlief. It goes deep into the event, the science behind the avalanche, and the lives of the people who tragically were killed in this massive avalanche. So I'm really excited to dive really deep. Of course, this is a sad subject, but we're really going to talk about its impact on the region, on Tahoe, and we're going to have some fun with this. So let's hop right into this episode with the Tahoe's Hella NorCal.
NorCal, we're hella NorCal, and I could spend all day just chilling in the South Bay. We're NorCal, we're hella NorCal, and Darren knows how to do to kick it down in Santa Cruz. We're NorCal, we're hella NorCal, and we get a little cray-cray when we visit the East Bay. We're NorCal, we're hella NorCal.
Before we hop into this interview with the directors of Buried, which I was so honored to get a screening of. It's a fantastic film. I just want to provide some backstory so there's no confusion among any listeners who might not know the story of this avalanche. Again, March 31st, 1982. It had been snowing for a week straight, 150 new inches over a week, and they were just The Alpine Meadows was closed, as was a lot of the ski resorts in the area, because it was just too much snow. It was too dangerous. The winds were reaching 120 miles an hour, and the avalanche team at Alpine Meadows, they were a really good avalanche team. Like they had Jim Plain, who we'll discuss later with the directors of the film. He was revolutionary in his science with avalanche mitigation, and Alpine Meadows is one of the highest avalanche risks in North America for any ski resort. It's just the way the hills come down. I believe it's a Class A avalanche ski resort. So they had these huge teams of ski patrol and avalanche mitigation team that would throw bombs at the hill when there were a ton of powder to try to ignite small avalanches. Every single morning they did this, just about, during a storm at least. And they also used World War I weaponry. They used howitzer guns to shoot at the hill to launch these smaller avalanches in hopes of avoiding the big one. Well, they did everything. They did everything to stop this avalanche, and it happened nonetheless. It was 3 avalanche zones, all dropped at once. It was 100-foot tall wall of white that came, coming down the hill at 100 miles an hour, and it hit the Summit Terminal building there at Alpine Meadows, completely destroyed the building. And unfortunately, 4 people perished in that building. There were also 3 people who were near the parking lot of the resort who were visiting and staying at a condo nearby. They were also buried by the avalanche. And then another gentleman who was on the ski patrol, and he was on a snowmobile. He was buried in the avalanche as well. It was a huge search and rescue mission that was undertaken. They found everyone within a couple days except for 2 people. And because of the ongoing avalanche issues in the area, they suspended operations. There were still a couple people under the snow that they had presumed dead. Although, buried in this building, they knew there were some air pockets that potentially they could have survived. So after 5 days, a dog goes into the rubble of this destroyed building covered in concrete snow from this avalanche and found a young woman alive. She had been buried alive for 5 days in essentially an area the size of a coffin in the dark. And she survived. And it's a fascinating story. It's tragic in so many ways. It's uplifting because they were able to find the young lady, and she, survived and lives today. And but essentially, this event, changed that area forever. It changed the way we look at avalanche control. It changed the way we look at community. I think when you look at some of these mountains who had been rivals, they really came together. Everyone in the community came together to volunteer to help out in this incident. And so it is a sad story, but it's also uplifting. And I dove super deep into this the last week. I read the book and I watched the film. And so I feel like I'm really up to date with all of this before we dive deep with our guests here. So let's start out with our interview with Jared and Steven. Once again, they are the writers and directors of the film Buried, a brand new documentary. It interviews the people in the film. It has great historic footage and photos of the incident, and it really gives a great look into this incident and how it impacted the community. So let's go to our interview with Jared and Steven. All right, I am so excited to now welcome on the creators of the brand new documentary Buried. It dives deep into the story of the 1982 avalanche in Alpine Meadows. Welcome to the podcast, Jared Drake and Steven Siig. How's it going, guys?
Doing great.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, we're excited to be here.
Of course. I got a chance to screen the movie last night, and I was so impressed. It is just an amazing film. You do a great job sort of setting the scene of the ski culture of the 70s and 80s, and also the theory behind avalanche mitigation at the time, before going deep into the tragedy and exactly what happened. So let's just start at the beginning. What inspired you to make this film? Obviously it's an important story to tell, but how did the wheels start turning, and how did you guys get into production?
We both live in Alpine Meadows, where the story takes place, where the event happened. And, I moved up to Alpine Meadows about 8 years ago. Siig has been in Alpine Meadows for 20-something.
Almost 30 years.
Almost 30 years. And you can't live in this community and not hear about this event and meet the people that were a part of it. And it's woven into the fabric of Alpine Meadows, and both raising families there and having day jobs there. We realized that the version of the story that we know to be true hadn't really been captured yet. And it was important to those that lived it that somebody capture it properly. So Jim Plain was actually a big motivating force to get the film made. He first went to Siig, pulled on Siig's ear to try and get a film made based on the event. And over time, we started the movie about 6 years ago. We spent about 2 years just talking to individuals that were here in 82, talking to to people that had perspectives, doing our own research.
Yeah, it was basically about doing our own research because there was a book, but we needed to be more of an independent eye into the story.
Yeah. And then as we kind of found our angle and what we wanted to say, and we got the approval from those within the community, we just hit the ground running. We shot it over almost 3 years. Did most of principal photography winter of 2018, 2019, did a full edit, knew we needed a bunch of pickups, shot more 2019, 2020, finished our edit in 2020, premiered in 2021. And it's a homegrown movie. Like we made it with using the resources we could, but primarily Siig and I living in Alpine Meadows. If it started snowing and we each had camera gear, it's like, Sigo, can you go pop off some shots while I'm dropping kids off and vice versa?
Yeah, it would be a give and take at all times because one of us would either be picking up kids, the other one would be, filming, B-roll.
Yeah.
So the partnership worked right from the get-go, to tell you the truth.
Yeah.
And some of that B-roll is just so serene. And again, you guys did a great job of getting sort of a modern look at the area, but also the historical footage. Much of this film is based on the interviews with the people who lived through it, right? Like, especially Jim Plain, you mentioned him. He's such a crucial character in this film. Was it difficult to get people on camera to discuss what has to be this tragic event in their life? Was it hard for them to sort of relive that?
Well, yes and no. There were certain individuals that needed to tell their story. One of the things that we always look to when we do a project, especially one this dramatic, is that it needs to be a cathartic process. And so what we found is people telling the story in front of camera actually really helped them reflect in a positive way. But there were others that did not want to talk to us, and we never wanted to pressure anyone. So it was really, we tried to make sure that they understood that it was a comfortable place. We actually shot it here at our movie theater, the Tahoe Art House and Cinema. So we could just put them in a black box and let them just go. And a lot of our subjects came in and had something to say. And that was refreshing because we didn't have to pry too hard. And that I thought was really important because if you respect the story and you respect their feelings, whether they're negative or positive, you got to let that emotion out. And so we were able to capture all of that emotion in this black box interview style.
Yeah. And I think that was an eye-opening kind of moment for us in development when we started sitting down with some of the subjects. You could see them go right back to 82. And, one question we had throughout the making of the movie is what's different about telling this story now versus if we had told it in 82. And when we saw that they were still living in 82 and they've lived with this story for 40 years, the question for us became, how do you live with this for 40 years and keep moving? How do you step by step every morning? What's that like? Because if we can siphon some of that out into the film, then it becomes relevant today for everybody watching the movie. And right now, so it's March 30th, 2022. Tomorrow is the 40th anniversary of the event. And Siig referenced the Tahoe Art House of Cinema, which is behind us. It's a killer independent art house movie theater in Tahoe City. And right now, as we're having this interview on March 30th, there's a screening happening inside, a private screening for only those who were here in 1982. Tomorrow, there's a big event happening at Alpine Meadows. Over 100 people that were here in 1982 are coming into town for it. And most of them are in the movie theater right now watching it for the first time. And that
was important to us because it's such a triggering film, not just for people that were there. It can be triggering for other people that have been faced, in any type of tragic situation.
Yeah.
And so this screening was really important for them to watch it in a place not surrounded with public. so they can digest the film first,
Yeah.
and then participate in tomorrow night's event as well.
Yeah, and everyone who's in the movie, and most people that still live in the area have seen the film and are all supportive of it. There's not one person that's in the movie or part of the story really that has seen it. That's critical. And so there's individuals who were reluctant to be a part of this film who are now a part of the community that's come together around this story being out there and bringing the community together. People who were against us and questionable about why we might be telling this story are in the theater right now, embracing and reuniting after 40 years.
Yeah, we'll give you an update on that, see how that goes. But what we've realized is that the film is something to rally around, because with the 40 years, there's a lot of people that have shied away from their emotions, and we now have realized that the film actually gives them an opportunity to face the story, tell those stories, and this will be the biggest gathering since 1982 of so many people coming to Alpine Meadows. And we have to say that Palisades Tahoe has just opened their arms up to the project and tomorrow's anniversary.
Yeah, they've been supportive across the board,
time.
Which is amazing.
Yeah. Not the easiest thing to market.
Right. Yeah. It's hard to describe because the incident's so sad and tragic, and yet you leave the film sort of uplifted, right? There are victories in the end, and I won't give it away, but 3/4 of the way through the film, you have someone being interviewed. I almost fell out of my chair. I was so shocked, and I'm sure you guys know who I'm talking about, but I'll leave that for people to watch, because I think it's just it's an emotional thing to see this person on camera. But yeah, you feel
thank you for covering up the spoiler there. I like that, Zach.
Yeah, well, I do, like, I'm not joking. I was like, I jolted. I could not believe it. But obviously, it's about community, and you hear the story how all these rival ski resorts sort of come together and help each other out, and volunteers were coming from all over to help dig, this avalanche. Other than the people who have watched the film, the community in general, what's been the response? And I'm thinking a lot about maybe younger people. I was not alive when this incident happened. And so I think about younger people, the teens and the early 20s kids who maybe haven't read the book. What has been their response to the film?
Well, that's a great question. And it was one of the reasons that we made the film, is that, it's that classic, back in 1982, we had this avalanche, you need to know this story. That's very true. People need to know this story, especially the younger generations, because we're seeing more and more of these weather events that are overwhelming. And people need to be aware of this story, because it's something I think we're going to see in the future. Bigger, gnarlier storms. And you have to be ready for that. And you have to plan for that, especially living here. It's something that you have to know, and you have to protect yourself, or, knowing this. Now that we have these avalanche centers, one of the things that the avalanche centers do are what are called observations. So when you're out there and you witness or you're in an avalanche, it's really important to report that back to the avalanche centers so that people can learn from those observations. And we look at this as one of the most crucial observations that are out there, because it's so overwhelming and such a big event that you have to sit there and take the time to really understand how big it was, and that it can happen again. And I think it will happen again.
Yeah. If you look at it in tiers, you have those people who recreate in the mountains, just leisurely, don't know a lot about what goes into snow safety and traveling, in snow country and mountainous terrain. And we've heard from a lot of them in our screenings raise their hand in Q&As and go, whoa, wait a second. Are there still avalanches? Like, very basic questions of, can this happen? Are there still avalanche? Do they still throw bombs?
Is that ski area still there?
Yeah. Is it still legal? It's not fully safe. And so there's been a lot of eye-opening moments for people to go, oh, it's not Disneyland. Like next time we've heard it a lot from people saying, next time I go into the mountains, I'm gonna check the weather report. It's like, yeah, do that. That's a good idea. And then sort of at the next like most extreme level, thinking about the next generation are those who are on the patrol now. And we really wanted this film to raise awareness and empathy and understanding for what patrol go through and what they sacrifice both physically and emotionally. And we thought a lot about the younger generation of patrol and what are they going to feel about this movie when they watch it. And we've gotten feedback from a lot of patrollers really just saying, look, this movie made me so proud to be on patrol. And it made me realize that part of what I might be going through or experiencing is okay. Which has been just great for validating for us.
Yeah. And now a lot of the ski patrol are using the film as a resource for training so that these younger generations and these kids that are coming up, these men and women, they see this pioneering moment because this was such a pioneering moment leading up to the avalanche and then the rescue itself. And so they need to be empowered in a lot of ways. And like Jared said, on the first tier, there's a lot of people that ski at Alpine Meadows or any other ski area, and they have no idea the sacrifice that ski patrol put in. And so it's really good for all levels of people that come and enjoy these mountains.
Yeah, I've never thought about how much danger they put themselves in until you look at in the film, they're starting avalanches with their skis. And I don't know if they do that practice anymore, but that's terrifying. So, and there were so many people who just sacrificed their own safety to try to help other people, both, before and after the avalanche. So you're right. That's just a great lesson. I know I don't have you guys for much longer. Based on my research, you guys have been going on this film tour. Have you won 5 awards for this film so far?
I think 7.
7 maybe.
Yeah. The film has been doing really well in the film festival circuit. And what we've been doing this year, one, we had to share this film with our community even before the movie was done. So many people have been anticipating this film. So what we have now are these special advanced screenings in support of the American Avalanche Association. So it's really kind of a time that we can give back even before we have our commercial release, which will happen in the fall of 2022. And each show, I should say, each show has sold out.
Yes, I know. I've tried to get tickets and I've been unable. I need to plan further ahead. But now I've seen it, so I'm happy. So what's your plan moving forward? Obviously, I know you guys are doing screenings April 1st through the 7th, I believe, at Tahoe Art House. And then you have some screenings scheduled off. I saw, and anyone can look on their website. They have a screening site. What's the plan after that? Do you guys want to take this to a larger scale, maybe a theatrical release or a screening or streaming? What's the plan for people who want to see it that maybe can't go to one of these screenings?
Yeah, so we wrap up these advanced screenings, which are all small mountain town screenings, which has been freaking the best to be able to show it in these towns. It's been awesome. We wrap up those screenings end of April, and then our official release will be in the fall. It looks like through Greenwich Entertainment, which is kind of a dream for us. They released Free Solo and The Rescue, and they have a track record of taking sort of niche outdoor / adventure stories to wider, broad audiences, which we always hoped this film would hit. We never defined this movie as a ski movie, but they're going to handle theatrical at this point, theatrical and transactional video on demand. We're still negotiating a streaming deal, so we aren't sure which platform it'll be available on streaming, the Netflix, HBO, Paramount Plus, Disney Plus, whatever that whole conversation.
Yeah.
Come
on board. Come on.
We'll hopefully have clarity
Start the
on
bidding
that by midsummer. But in the fall, we'll have a good theatrical release through Greenwich. That'll start off in, major markets, depending on how it does. It can grow or just dissipate from there, and then it'll be available for streaming afterwards.
Yeah. What was reassuring is one of the awards that we're really proud of is the Austin Film Festival. And that proved to us, or reassured us, that this transcends into a wider audience. And that it's not just a mountain town film, that we can learn from this film and this incident on a wider scope. And we know that it works now. So that was very reassuring.
Yeah. And along the way, we were fortunate enough to land the film in front of two heavyweight producers, Evan Hayes, who produced Free Solo and won an Academy Award for that, and Michael Sugar, who produced Spotlight, won an Academy Award for that. They both came on to the movie and helped us do our final edit. They brought their creative team, they brought their graphics and visual effects teams, and really dialed it up a couple notches for the final cut, and have been instrumental in helping us navigate how to release a movie and bring on their relationships and whatnot. So it's been, it's been really rewarding to see that the movie can touch and work wider audiences beyond just our community and our towns.
We're going to release a full review of this film without spoilers, of course, on our website, but just my quick elevator review is I knew the story really well, and you guys somehow still brought emotions out of me just from listening to the story from the people. So very well done on everything. I appreciate you guys telling the story and doing it in such a way that you did. So thanks for all you do. Good luck on your tour, and hopefully we see this on a big streaming platform soon.
Awesome.
Right.
Thanks, man.
Thanks again.
Thank you. Bye. All right. Thank you to Jared and Steven for doing that interview. Once again, fantastic film. Great devices that they use to tell the story through historical footage and the interviews of the people who lived through it. It's really good. It's probably a must watch for anyone who's interested in outdoor culture here in Northern California. Of course, we'll keep you updated when it's streaming, but if you have a chance, go find one of their screenings either in Tahoe or around the country, and you will not regret it, I promise you. So on top of watching that film, I also read the book, A Wall of White, to really, really dive deep onto this subject. And we did it as sort of a book club with Mr. Chip O'Brien, the man, the myth, the legend. So now let's go to Chip to discuss the book. All right, and continuing this topic of the deadly avalanche on Alpine Meadows, March 31st, 1982, we have the man, the myth, the legend, Chip O'Brien on the line here. Him and I both read A Wall of White, the Jennifer Woodlief book from 2009 about the incident. And now we're going to do a little review of the book. I think it's sort of it's required reading, I think, for anyone in the area that's interested in this stuff. Don't you think?
Yeah, I was blown away that I had not heard the story before. I mean, it's a quintessential Tahoe story. Yeah, I agree. Required reading.
Yeah, it was. It's a pretty quick read. They do. Woodlief, the author, she goes deep into some of the characters' lives, which can be a lot sometimes. But you at the end, you kind of understand why she did it. She's trying to really humanize the situation and bring human value into what can over time just count as like a death toll, but she really humanizes each person.
Well, I think it's a really kind of good mixture between, natural phenomenon and, you know, what happens when you put human beings in the mix. I mean, you can't fight Mother Nature. I mean, that's clearly a message.
Right. And she sort of hops around to different lives and then back to the snow stuff, the ski culture, the avalanche, the science behind this avalanche stuff, which was really fascinating. I mean, I certainly gravitated more towards the snow, the avalanche stuff myself. A lot of it was stuff I didn't know, and we'll get into it. Well, let's just start, and we're gonna have spoilers in this because I did. I know it's been 40 years. But the interview I did with the filmmakers of Buried, I wanted to make sure that their film wasn't spoiled because there are some actual awesome surprises in it. So anyone listening, if you don't want to know the full story, turn the podcast off now. But really, this book starts out, the part that I really loved with exploring sort of the ski culture and avalanche safety practices of the 70s and 80s. And, you know, Alpine Meadows in general is, I think they called it a Class A avalanche mountain, right? It's one of the most difficult avalanche ski resorts in North America.
It is number one. I mean, when there is an avalanche, these resorts are required to report them. And Alpine Meadows consistently was number one in the United States for avalanche hazards.
Yeah, and you look at the map, and it's these sheer faces, and they all sort of funnel into the same area, right? And that's, yeah. I mean, it's really, and we go on to find out that this was like a perfect storm of all of these areas releasing sort of at once. But it started out sort of going into this avalanche mitigation tactics, and it was interesting to hear about the war tactics that they used. I mean, I didn't know that in World War I, an estimated 40,000 people died in avalanches because they would see these people below these areas with snow, and they would launch, bombs into the area below, and avalanches would kill the other army. I did not know that. and so essentially they learned, and some of the people who brought this avalanche mitigation theory to the United States and to ski resorts, they started doing the same thing. They started bombing these slopes, and they knew that once the snow had released, it was safe to go on there. So I did not know that. I thought that was fascinating.
Well, can't you see what the attractions, some of these guys who worked at the ski resorts like Alpine Meadows, the attraction they must have had for this work? All they do is ski all day and blow shit up.
Yeah. No, I found myself wanting to do it. And a lot of these guys, I was fascinated in this book that she tells you a lot of them had college degrees and decent college degrees. Yeah. And yet they chose to work for $5 an hour to throw bombs on the mountain. And you can kind of understand why, right?
And they'd make more money during the summertime pumping gas.
That's right. The one guy, he pumped gas at Soda Springs, and he was making more money doing that than he was doing sort of his quote unquote main job. But they loved it, and
well, doesn't it sound like fun?
It sounds like fun, but I also think some of them took that role of providing safety really seriously, and I think you learn that later on when the actual avalanche happens.
One thing that is kind of cool is that this whole story is based on an avalanche that took less than 10 seconds.
Yes, I was thinking that.
And
40 years later, the community is still impacted.
Yep.
And so Jim Plain, Jim in the book, he was sort of this. Yeah, the book describes him as this kind of this genius. He's this quiet, sort of antisocial gentleman who took over the avalanche control of Alpine Meadows and was doing stuff that no one was really doing. He really took his job seriously, and he was sort of a revolutionary in that sense that he took detailed logs, and he was just doing a lot of stuff that they still do today. And in the film, he's interviewed, and it's he's still deeply impacted by the avalanche. So I told the filmmaker it was kind of like a therapy session for him, because
right.
he feels responsible, even though we know he couldn't stop it. Right? I mean, they tried everything they could.
They also talked about the people after the avalanche that were desperately trying to find potential survivors to get, people out. But I also kind of reflected on, how, like you said, even today, a lot of these people carry emotional scars. And at least at the time, we didn't really have an understanding that there might be that kind of result. I mean, you're dealing with a very short time fuse on the situation for potentially people to still be alive, and to know that, if you take a 10-minute break, people might die. I mean, there was a sense of urgency, and that had to sort of, carve tunnels in your psyche.
Yeah, it's interesting that the book starts with these war tactics that were used, and the whole movie sort of feels like a war book, right? They're constantly at war with this natural threat.
Right.
So much so that at the end of the book, they are dropping bombs from a helicopter onto this mountain to try to calm it down, to make sure they were safe, because they were so scared of this mountain.
Right. And even that was kind of a Hail Mary, because, one of the things the book really kind of captures, I think, is how little we knew about snow science in 1982, and how much we've learned as a result. Unfortunately, some of it was as a result of this particular avalanche. I mean, I was fascinated to learn that, as snow crystals are blowing down a mountain, they can create static electricity, and there can actually be lightning inside of an avalanche, and that these masses of snow can move at 200 plus miles an hour. Unbelievable. I mean, talk about the awesome power of nature.
I can't even fathom how everyone said the snow felt electric that day. It felt like they could feel something in the snow. And it kind of reminds me of, unfortunately, the fire plumes that we see around Northern California that create their own weather system, and thunder and lightning start coming out of it. It's such a strong force of nature that it creates these incredible different instances. I do want to talk about the people in the book, because it really is just a huge part of it. And there were 7 people that died. There were 2 gentlemen on vacation, and one of the gentleman's daughter, who were hiking up.
Laura Nelson.
I'm sorry?
Laura Nelson, the 11-year-old.
Yeah, Laura Nelson. They were hiking. They had cabin fever because they were stuck in the cabin due to this incredible storm, and they tried to hike up to the resort, and they were just wrong place, wrong time. And the book actually talks about how, if they had paused, I think, for 30 seconds at one point to look at a snowcat, and if they hadn't have done that, they probably would have missed it. Really sad. And there was Jake Smith, who is sort of the hero in this, a heroic figure in this book, right? He was this rebellious outdoorsman, big beard, loved by everyone, sort of the jester of the mountain, right? He ended up dying, and he was the first person to report the avalanche. And they say, in his casket, they put his fly fishing rod in there, and he was just this gregarious outdoor lover. And they actually ended up naming a peak after him over in Tahoe. So he was someone you sort of root for the entire time.
Well, you alluded to this just a little while ago. I mean, Woodlief, the author, she really gets into some pretty hefty detail about these people's lives. And I don't know about you, Zach, but when I started sort of getting into this, I started asking myself as a reader, why does this matter? What does this have to do with anything? But then as you get into it, you realize that, these are the characters of the story. These were the people who were there. Some of them made it and some of them didn't. And for those that didn't, it kind of answers the question, how in the world were you at that particular place at that particular time? And she tells the story. And I guess, particularly by the time we got to the end of the novel, I found that satisfying, because even though an avalanche is a natural disaster, it's also very much a human disaster.
Right. And it was a little somewhat grueling to get through these intimate details of these people, right? But it certainly pays off. These little conversations that these people are having and how they ended up in that place is fascinating. I mean, how many people that died? I think 5 people that died in it should not have been there, period, right? And that brings me to another character, Bernie Kingery, who
the last body was found.
Last body to be found, the manager of the mountain, the guy who ran everything and was sort of a father figure to everyone. He had chewed a couple people out that day for being at the resort because he said it was just too dangerous. And he was someone that everyone loved, but he was hard on people, and he was an authoritative person. But he seemed like sort of the main character of the book to me.
Yeah, I kind of was a refreshing combination. You've got these dudes. I mean, you mentioned Jake Smith. Having been a fly fishing guide for a lot of years, I kind of know the type. You live for your passion. But when it came to safety, I mean, these guys were all about safety. I mean, and even though we didn't know as much as we know now about snow safety and avalanche safety, these guys were doing the best they could with what they had.
Right. And then the last people who passed were Beth Morrow and Frank Yateman. Beth was working that day, and Frank was actually visiting. He was a student at UC Davis. He was visiting his girlfriend, Anna, and they had gone up to the resort to sort of check things out, and that leads me to Anna, who survived, who was the one survivor of the avalanche, and she has a fascinating story, and I want to get to her in a little bit. But I did get this big sense of this community of people, and people really loved working at that resort.
They did.
And
I mean,
how many?
No money.
Yeah, for almost no money. They talked about these college girls who were, it was Beth and it was, and Anna was one of them, and they could barely afford food, right? But they loved working. And on this day where they have the day off, they just decided, hey, we're going to head up to the resort anyway and see what we can do. Mm-hmm. And these people, they just love the lifestyle. They love the mountains. And there were a lot of stories of people like that who just, again, some of these people had, like, one guy I think had an engineering degree from college, and he just ends up on the ski patrol and he stays there for 20 years, Yeah. So it really, to me, I don't think that much about when I'm at ski resorts, I don't really think about the employees all that much and their story. And you do see a lot of people who just come in and want the experience for a winter or whatever. And then you see the diehard people who, the guys with their huge beards, and this is the life that they chose, even though they're probably fully capable of having a great financial career and could have the white picket fence and the big house, but yet they choose to sort of live this life on the mountain.
Don't you just really respect that? I mean,
I do.
Got, right?
I do. And
passion over money.
Yeah, and it's I believe it was Jake Smith who came from a pretty affluent family, and he just said, later, guys. He lived in the Bay Area, and he just said, all right, I'm heading up to the mountain. When he was 18 and sort of didn't stop. He knew what he wanted at a young age and went for it. So it's what was really cool about how she went into it is I feel like I really know these people now, or, knew them back then, at least for the people who perished. But okay, let's talk about the avalanche, because the avalanche is fascinating. This is a storm that I over the week had accumulated 100 inches of snow.
Yeah.
And it even mentions Jim Plain. His last reading before the avalanche was 100 inches exactly for the storm.
Right.
And they attempted to do this avalanche, this bomb stuff. They did basically double what they typically did.
Right.
But it just was not working for whatever reason. And they couldn't see if it were working because it was such a blizzard.
Well, you call it a perfect storm, and I think that's an excellent description of it. I mean, what happened that day in the mountains was unprecedented. Nobody'd seen it before like that, and never come down like that before, as densely or for as long a time. The snow was just piling up faster than anybody knew how to deal with.
Yeah, and it was the winds were 120 miles an hour, so it was coming hard at an angle, which could make the snow accumulate at double the rate. I think that 2 inches an hour, which, do the math on that, you can get 3 to 4 feet a day. So it was really, and this was over a week, and they just could not get ahead of the snow as much as they tried. I mean, it was too dangerous for the guys to even go up and bomb the ridges because they couldn't see anything. They were worried about their own safety, and some of them really put their lives at risk trying to do that.
Well, they also, finally they had to the snow is piling up at such a rate that they just couldn't continue, and nobody knew if there wouldn't be another avalanche. And so they suspended it for 3 days before they felt it was safe enough to go back. And all that while, there's Anna Allen still alive under the snow.
It after the avalanche, it snowed another 50 inches over the. So it was the total, I believe, was 149. So it was 49 more inches after that avalanche occurred, and like you said, it was just this ongoing threat, and that's what makes me think of this war. They're throwing bombs, they're shooting howitzers. And yet they're terrified of this mountain because it could strike at any moment.
Yeah, it snow's the enemy. The mountain's the enemy.
Right. And just the sheer velocity of the avalanche was another thing. They think it could move 100 miles an hour. That the science of how light the snow was at the top, and how the dense snow that was coming down started flying over it, almost like a ramp.
Yeah.
To create
most of the
this.
snow was up in the air.
Yeah, it was 100 feet in the air.
So that picture a tidal wave of snow.
That was amazing. Not many people saw it either. I think Jake Smith was one person who saw it. And that was unfortunately before he perished, so he never got the chance to really explain what it looked like to anyone. He just got over his radio and said avalanche. So it was so the snow coming down was so dense you couldn't even see this catastrophic event.
You almost we'll never know for sure because we can't speak to Jake Smith, but what if it was just like an entire whiteout? I can sort of picture that scenario too. Wouldn't the avalanche blend in with all the white all around it? I don't know, but
yes, no, that's a great point. It's I don't know how much you could have seen it anyway, unless you're seeing it with the trees or you're hearing it. And then last thing I wanted to say is how the ski patrol guys, who were actually over at Squaw Valley, neighboring Squaw Valley, because you drop off the backside of Squaw Valley to bomb certain areas of Alpine Meadows. And by the way, those two ski resorts are now one combined ski resort. They're building a gondola to combine the two. It's going to be the largest ski resort in North America. But so a lot of the main ski patrol guys were not at the mountain at the time. So they described when they got back just a completely different landscape, right? The trees were all over the place. They were busted. They were, taken out of the roots, whatever. The building, the summit building, gone. It crumbled, covered in snow. The parking lot was non-existent, really. It like you couldn't tell the difference between the row or the run and the parking lot because it was covered in 10 feet of snow.
Yeah.
And then the cars were covered, right? The cars had disappeared that were once in the parking lot, and all their, equipment was just completely destroyed. So that, I think, really goes to the magnitude of the avalanche.
Yeah, it's a frozen tidal wave. It's amazing.
Yeah. So it hits, Jake Smith and the three people walking, they were covered just by snow. And then the rest of the people who were killed were in the summit building. Right. So this creates this massive search and rescue campaign to try to bring these people out. It was, for one, it was inspiring to see the entire community rally around it. And, people were coming from all over saying, I got a shovel, I'll dig.
Yeah, the search began 5 minutes after the avalanche was done. 5 minutes.
Yeah. And
people were right there.
And the one person that they were able to save didn't get saved for 5 days.
Yeah. 117 hours.
Yes. So that was Anna, who
you got to admit, Zach, you have to have tried to imagine what was going through Anna's head. She's in a 5 by 3 by 2 foot, completely black, coffin-sized space under lots and lots of snow for 5 days. What would that have been like? I mean,
yeah,
I can't imagine.
She said she was very confused at what happened, right? She doesn't really know. She's laying down there and doesn't really know what happened, but she can hear the guns going off. So she knows she's at Alpine Meadows. And the blast of the snow hits her, she gets concussed or whatever. And she really just doesn't remember.
Right.
And she lays there for 5 days and talk about, this book talks about how everyone gets to their exact spot, right? And which for a lot of people either led to their demise or to, not being in the avalanche. But for her, she could not have been in a more perfect spot in that building.
Oh, that's it. I mean, freak luck. I mean, that was, I seem to remember while laying there, she even somehow in the dark found a match and lit it. So she must have had some idea of that, she was at least surrounded by snow, and like you said, at Alpine Meadows, but
essentially she I don't know if she was right next to the lockers or what, but the lockers fell and they land on a bench, creating this little pathway for her.
Space, right.
That was covered in however many, like thousands of pounds of snow, but it held up. And it's just fascinating. And the reason why they kept searching that building so really, really hard, even though they assumed a lot of these people were dead, is because they knew there were air pockets in there. And that's how people die in avalanches is because they don't have any air. Right. So they thought, well, these people might have survived the blast and then they have some air, so they might still be alive. And sure enough, she was.
Well, here's a question, and I don't know the answer to this question, but she was in a 5 by 3 by 2 foot space. How is there 5 days worth of air in that space? I don't know.
Well, I think it's because the air can kind of flow through different areas. Like, just because she can't fit through these little holes doesn't mean.
I see what you mean. Okay.
Yeah, and they talk about the dog and
Bridget,
who Bridget was sort of able to fit in there, right? And they said there was actually enough room that Bridget found that Bridget could turn around and come back out forward. So they knew there was kind of some room. So I think there were little pockets here and there with little holes that air could get through. She wasn't completely locked in. But yeah, let's talk about Bridget. So avalanche dogs are a huge part of most ski resorts I can think of, at least any ski resort with any decent avalanche issues. They've become a huge, viral internet thing. Like people love to see these dogs on the mountain. But Bridget, a German Shepherd who had been thoroughly trained in finding people with avalanches, which she was one of the first in North America, at least, found Anna and alerted her owner that found a live human. Right. And the owner, the dog handler, told the search and rescue team, hey, this dog said there's someone alive in there. And unfortunately, they still suspended the search and rescue because they thought another avalanche was going to come down and kill everyone else.
Perfectly reasonable.
Very, very reasonable. And I'll say, once again, I said that Jim Plain, who made that call, who sort of took over management from Bernie, who was under the snow, he still has real big issues with that decision he made. But yeah. I do think it was the right decision. I think, hindsight's 50-50. Right. Oh. They had assumed that no one could have probably survived that, but she did. And Bridget comes through, once they finally resumed the search after 2 days, Bridget finds her again, alerts again, and they get Anna out. It was the first live recovery from an avalanche dog ever in North America.
Well, how cool is that? Now, Zach, I know you're a dog lover and we are as well. I mean, I take my dog to the park every day and she spends most of the time sniffing. But one of the things that I learned in the book, and I think this is just extremely cool, is that human beings have, 5 million scent receptors in our nose with which to smell. Dogs have 200 million in their nose. So maybe there's where the
40 times the amount. Yeah.
Amazing. So, I'm kind of seeing my dog in a whole new way.
Right. Yeah. And the fact that dog, that dog seemed really smart. And again, hindsight's 50-50 because dogs were alerting at certain things, but because there was sort of human stuff all over the place in that rubble, right? There were like lunches, there were different hats that were thrown about, whether they were in a locker or whatever. So that made it really hard for the dogs to find. But this dog was so certain that there was a person in there. And finally, sure enough, they were. And I have to go back to, this is how dangerous the situation was. They weren't letting anyone on that road because they thought that another avalanche was coming down and the avalanche could come and bury the road just like it had done to the two fathers and the daughter. Right. And they found a helicopter, which turned out to be KCRA 3 here in Sacramento. It was their like traffic helicopter. I love this story, by the way. Yeah. The avalanche guys get to the helicopter pilot and they say, unload all your crap, get your cameras out of here, get everything out of here, and we're going up there. And the pilot says, well, what are in those bags? And they say explosives. And he said, please don't tell me anymore.
Yes.
It's like a scene out of a movie, right?
Yeah, right.
Like that's like a Sly Stallone line,
I'll be back. Arnold.
They were so terrified of this mountain at this time because they had just like no way of controlling the avalanches. And they knew that there was another almost 5 feet of snow that had fallen on it since. So they didn't necessarily know where the avalanche came from. And so it was just, there were so many questions that they had that were quite frankly terrifying.
Yeah, but isn't it amazing how many guys stayed anyway?
Oh yeah.
What a story of heroism, I think.
Absolutely.
Really
In the face of everything, it seemed like everyone wanted to be there and to help, even though it was truly dangerous. So, anyway, Anna survived. She was very sick when she got out and went to the hospital and ended up her leg was amputated due to frostbite.
Yeah.
Well, parts of her toes on one and then her leg on the other.
Okay.
Yeah. And the next
she's still
December, the next December, she was skiing on Alpine Meadows.
Yeah.
with her new leg. So, you know, it's again, this story just talks about this culture and this enthusiasm these people have for life and for skiing and for the mountains. And that right there is indicative of that. And, you know, one of the story of one of the fathers who lost his daughter, I believe it was Beth.
Mm-hmm.
He actually started skiing because of it. He wanted to face his demons, and now he goes up to Alpine Meadows. And so it's overall, it's a tragic story, no doubt, but I think inspiring. I think without Anna surviving, it is this grim story, right? It's just this, and the fact that they got that triumph out of it, that the community worked so hard for, I think really makes the story that much better and much more uplifting.
Hey, I'm going to admit it. At the end of the book, I was crying. I was, you know?
Yeah, I certainly felt emotional. Yeah. Yeah. So, and that was all because she set up all those characters throughout the book.
Yeah.
Right?
And obviously if she hadn't done that, it wouldn't have had that impact. But you by the end of the book, you certainly knew these people. Right.
So that's all I had on it. I really enjoyed the book. It's actually, like I said, it's a fast read. I think I plowed through it in about 4 or 5 hours. So I do think, once again, it is required reading for a lot of people. This incident happened before I was born, and I didn't know a ton about it, but I certainly should have known more than I did. And now that I've been immersing myself with this story for the last 3 days, I think I know quite a bit about it. But do you have any final thoughts on the book?
Well, you want to talk about saw-whet owls?
Oh, that is right. Go ahead, tell it.
Well, I mean, okay. I've been a writing teacher and a literature teacher for many years, and the author used a technique, and I'm not sure I don't think there is a technical literary term for this, but when an author starts by bringing in a device that's not really related to the avalanche, in this case, a rare species of owl that was kind of known to be in the area and yet very, very rare, seen throughout literature as a forebear of evil or doom or
a premonition.
Yeah. What did Shakespeare call it? The fatal bellman. The fatal bellman.
Yeah.
It's like when you see one of these guys, your butt's cooked. So in the beginning of the story, Larry Haywood sees one, and it's kind of well known, at least in the community among bird lovers, that this is like a once in a lifetime experience. And the way so the author brings that in the beginning, and I was kind of scratching my head and said, what does this have to do with much? Anyway, she then kind of reaches around at the end of the novel, and there's Larry Haywood again, finding a dead saw a wet owl just above 8,000 feet where the avalanche was. And, I'm thinking to myself, okay, this is supposed to mean something. What does it mean? I got to admit, I'm not super big on this kind of supernatural stuff. And, I think an owl is an owl, even maybe it's a rare owl. But so that is a, former literature teacher didn't quite wash with me. I know what she was trying to do. She was trying to just start and end the novel in the same way to allow the reader to feel a certain sense of satisfaction. But I think I got much more satisfaction out of Anna Allen, for example, than I did The Darn Owl. I don't know. What did you think about that?
No, I actually enjoyed it. It gave her final sentence of the book.
Yeah.
And I understand that. I use that in some of the writing I do, whether it's kind of maybe it's too easy of a device to use for some writers, you know what I mean? But she brought up the owl, and I thought that was it, right? It was like, because you get through this book, and I don't think the avalanche comes. It's a 250-page book. I don't think it comes till page 150.
Oh,
right.
It's really interesting. The avalanche is in chapter 13.
Right. Yeah. So, what's coming, right? It's the cover of the book is a freaking huge avalanche. Like, what's coming. But so she mentions the owl, and I thought, oh, that's kind of a cool premonition. And I didn't think about it again. Yeah. And then she hits you with it in the last one. And who knows how true this story actually is, Yeah. But and I don't know what it means to have that owl be dead, whether this community sort of rose up and defeated this evil omen. I don't know, but
kind of implied there were supernatural forces at work, and I'm not sure I quite bought that. If that's what she was trying to accomplish.
Yeah, it's. I don't want to give too much away about the film, but a lot of people talked about not supernatural, but nature sort of talking to them, and nature saying, guess what? I'm in control, and a lot of people sort of felt that because it was, so that first night that they were searching and they called it off, I think at whatever it was, 8 p.m. or something, when it got dark and they didn't know the avalanche danger. And one of the people said they looked up at the sky that night. No one could sleep, obviously, right? And they look up at the sky, and the sky's clear, and there's a full moon. And it's kind of nature just saying, yeah, I can do whatever I want, and you can't control it.
Yeah. And
it's kind of like teasing them. And that's the same with the owl. The owl's like, hey, I'm nature, I'm here, and you can't do anything about it, Yeah. So it's sort of this lack of control that humans, it feels like we have control, even when you're throwing, dynamite and shooting the mountain with howitzers, you still cannot control it. So that's what I got out of it.
Yeah, I really like the analogy you made earlier about, even though they're kind of on the opposite ends of the spectrum, avalanches, you can control an avalanche about as well as you control a wildfire, not.
Yeah. Yeah, you cannot. Yeah. It's
crazy. But I found the whole thing really entertaining. I learned a whole bunch. And, I got to tell you, particularly Anna Allen's story really kind of touched me.
Yeah, I agree. And she's still alive today. She's still around and kicking. That's pretty darn cool. Although I'm sure she lives with that, those scars. But she does. It's both physically and mentally. She lives with them. It's the human, the personification, I guess is the right word, of this incident. It was a really good tool for the author, Jennifer Woodlief. So.
Well, I can't imagine that it wouldn't have brought the ski community closer together anyway.
Right. Well, that's that. I think we covered everything, didn't we?
I think so. I hope so.
So this is coming out. We're recording this March 30th. This podcast will come out the 31st, the 40th anniversary of the event.
Is that like tomorrow? That's tomorrow.
That is tomorrow. Yeah. I know you're semi-retired, but you got to look at the calendar every once in a while.
You're just envious.
So along with this podcast, we're going to be doing a bunch of content surrounding this, including you wrote a written review of the book as well. So anybody who listened to this can go back and read Chip's review of it. I'll be doing a review of the film, and of course we'll be covering everything on this podcast. So Chip, thanks as always.
Stay active.
Stay active. All right. Thank you to Chip for coming onto the podcast once again. I believe that's his 4th time on our podcast. But it's fun when we get to do those little book clubs. We sort of bounce around and talk about the story, but it's the book is great. It really is. And I think just like the film is must watch, the book is must read. You'll learn a lot about Tahoe, about weather, about snow, and mostly about community and people's lives and the importance of living your life to the fullest and being around a good community that cares. So I really enjoyed diving deep on this subject. We are filming this March 30th. So tomorrow, March 31st, this is going out to the public, the 40-year anniversary of this incident. Never forget, learn from the incident, and, to all those people who were part of both the book and the film, kudos to you. It must have been difficult to relive such a tragic event, but it does help us learn and really just, keep a tight community, be good. So that does it for this podcast. We are going to hop right back into our podcast schedule. We got some great interviews coming up. As many of you longtime listeners notice, Bob is no longer here. He has left for, I'm not going to say greener pastures. He's left for different pastures because what could be greener than sitting here and talking with me? But I took a couple months we had, a ton of stuff to work on, and I just wanted to make sure we get everything right before we hop back on. Bob did all of our producing, and he was an integral part of this. So I just wanted to make sure I was prepared to hop back into a full schedule. But we are back. We're going to try to do one of these a week, and it's just going to be completely interview style. Hopefully we'll get 2 to 3 interviews per episode. Of course, I'll also cover some news of the week because I think there's some important stuff that's happening recently that I would like to just get my voice out on and discuss a little bit. So we're back, baby. Make sure to please subscribe to the Talking NorCal podcast, wherever you get your podcast. We are on Spotify, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, Apple. We're anywhere where you can find podcasts. So search for us, go subscribe. We really appreciate the support. You can also follow us on social media, Active NorCal, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, also Talking NorCal, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. We post a lot of the clips from each of these episodes so you guys can stay up to date about what we're talking about and sort of the highlights of our fun episodes. Also, we're on YouTube. We'll be posting these full episodes on the Talking NorCal YouTube page, as well as clips on our Active NorCal YouTube page. So you got to follow us everywhere in order to get the full experience of our content. Once again, I appreciate your support. I appreciate you listening. Hit that subscribe, and remember, stay active.
NorCal, we're hella NorCal, and I could spend all day just chilling in the South Bay. We're NorCal, we're hella NorCal, and there knows how to do to kick it down in Santa Cruz. Or NorCal, we're hella NorCal, and we get a little cray-cray when we visit the East Bay. We're NorCal, we're hella NorCal, and we get a little mental when we visit Sacramento. Yeah, we're NorCal, we're hella NorCal, and we protect nature's bounty when we visit Humboldt County. Yeah, we're NorCal, we're hella NorCal, and me, I'm hella cool 'cause I've been Sebastopol, we're NorCal, we're hella NorCal. And you know that we gotta go, we're